In 1877, one man in America owned more cash than the United States government. Not more than one state, not more than one city, more than Washington, more than the entire federal treasury. His name was Cornelius Vanderbilt, and 96 years later, his family held a reunion. Not one person in that room was a millionaire. This is the story of what he could buy, and why no billionaire on earth can touch any of it today. His father was a farmer. His family had nothing. At 11 years old, he dropped out of school to work on the docks. At 16, he borrowed $100 from his mother, in today's money, about $2,500, and bought a small wooden ferry boat. One boat, one route, Staten Island to Manhattan. Within 2 years, he had driven every competitor off that route, not because he was smarter, because he was ruthless. When a rival entered his territory, Vanderbilt didn't complain. He didn't go to court. He dropped his prices so low that his competitor bled money every single week. Then he waited. When they finally gave up, he raised his prices back, then moved to the next route, and did it again. By the 1850s, he controlled the largest private steamship network in the entire United States. By 1877, his fortune reached $105 million. That number sounds almost small by modern standards, but here is what it actually meant. At the time of his death, Vanderbilt personally owned 1.15% of the entire U.S. economy. 1 out of every $87 circulating in America belonged to one man. To match that percentage today, you would need a fortune of over $185 billion. That makes him proportionally wealthier than Elon Musk, wealthier than Jeff Bezos, wealthier than any living human being on this planet right now. But the number is not the point. The point is what he could do with it. In 1850, there was no income tax in America, no antitrust laws, no campaign finance rules, no Securities and Exchange Commission, no Federal Trade Commission, essentially no rules at all governing what a rich man could do with his money politically. Today, if a billionaire walked into a senator's office and handed him $500,000 in cash and said, "Vote the way I tell you," that billionaire would be arrested before sundown. Federal bribery charges, FBI investigation, the end of everything. In 1850, that was just called business. Stanford University historians studying this era called it one of the most corrupt periods in American history, precisely because there were no legal walls between private money and public power. Politicians were not just influenced by the wealthy, they were purchased by them, openly, in cash. One tycoon of the era, Jay Gould, said it better than anyone when someone told him something he wanted to do wasn't legal. He looked at them and said, "What do I care about the law? Ain't I got the power?" That was not arrogance. That was just an accurate description of reality. Vanderbilt didn't need lobbyists. He didn't need lawyers filing briefs in the dark. He didn't need shell companies and super PACs. He could walk into a room, put money on a table, and reshape the political map of New York before lunch. That kind of direct, unfiltered power over government? No amount of money buys that today. The laws that exist right now were written specifically, deliberately, to prevent it. When Vanderbilt moved into railroads in the 1860s, he didn't invest in railroads, he bought them. The New York and Harlem Railroad, his. The Hudson River Railroad, his. The New York Central Railroad, his. Then he merged them, standardized them, and built the first unified rail connection from New York City all the way to Chicago. If you needed to move freight from the East Coast to the Midwest, you paid Vanderbilt. There was no alternative. None existed. He didn't dominate the market. He was the market. The entire thing. One man. Today, if Amazon tried to buy its 3 largest competitors to build that kind of monopoly, the Department of Justice would block it within months. The Federal Trade Commission would sue immediately. Regulators across 40 states would pile on. The European Union would add sanctions. The Sherman Antitrust Act, passed in 1890, was written specifically because of what Vanderbilt built. The law exists because of him. Before it existed, owning an entire industry wasn't illegal. It wasn't even controversial. It was just what powerful men did. Now, this next part, almost nobody knows this story. And when you hear it, you will not believe it is real. In the 1850s, before the Panama Canal was built, Vanderbilt controlled the only practical route between America's East Coast and West Coast. It ran through Nicaragua. He owned the steamships on the rivers. He owned the roads overland. He controlled the entire transit system through that country. Then, in 1856, a man named William Walker, an American lawyer with no military training, took a private army into Nicaragua, fought through a civil war, and declared himself president. The United States government officially recognized his government as legitimate. Walker's first act as president of Nicaragua? He cancelled Vanderbilt's transit rights and handed those routes to Vanderbilt's business rivals. Now, most people in that situation would call their lawyers, file an international complaint, wait years for a resolution. Vanderbilt sent soldiers. He funded and personally coordinated a military campaign. His private agents armed and joined forces with Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Together, they invaded Nicaragua. They captured Walker's steamships first, cutting off his supply lines. His army starved, deserted, fell apart. Walker surrendered in May 1857. Vanderbilt got his roots back. One businessman, one cancelled contract, one overthrown government. Today, if any billionaire privately funded a military operation to remove a foreign head of state, they would face charges under the U.S. Neutrality Act, international criminal law, sanctions from dozens of governments, and likely prosecution at the International Criminal Court. In 1856, Vanderbilt did it. Then went back to his office in New York. No charges, no consequences, no arrest. The Vanderbilt family did not just spend money. They built monuments so large that some of them still stand today, not as homes, but as museums too significant to tear down. George Vanderbilt, Cornelius's grandson, purchased 125,000 acres in North Carolina, larger than many American cities. He built a private brick factory on the land, just to produce enough bricks for the house.
He built 3 miles of private railroad track just to deliver materials to the construction site. He employed 1,000 workers and 60 specialized stonemasons. The finished house has 35 bedrooms, 43 bathrooms, 65 fireplaces, an indoor swimming pool, and a bowling alley built underground. He called it Biltmore. It is still the largest privately owned home in America. It is now open to tourists. In Newport, Rhode Island, the Vanderbilts built a 70-room summer mansion called the Breakers, used approximately 8 weeks per year, staffed by 36 full-time servants. The Marble House, another Newport property, cost $11 million to build in 1892. In today's money, over $380 million. For a vacation home, 8 weeks a year. The family owned 10 separate mansions on Fifth Avenue in New York City alone. 10 on one street. And none of it was enough. Because here is what the history books put quietly at the end of the chapter and never discuss. In 1973, the Vanderbilt family gathered for a reunion. 120 descendants of Cornelius Vanderbilt came together in one room. Not one of them was a millionaire. The greatest private fortune in American history, proportionally larger than any fortune alive today, was completely gone in under 100 years. Spent on mansions later demolished, on parties no one remembers, on divorces that cost fortunes by themselves. Gloria Vanderbilt, great-great-granddaughter of the Commodore, died in 2019. Her total estate, less than $1.5 million. Her son is Anderson Cooper, the CNN anchor. He has said publicly that he received no inheritance and was raised to earn everything himself. Cornelius Vanderbilt built an empire that touched every dollar in America. 4 generations later, his family left less than the cost of a Manhattan apartment. Between 1890 and 1920, the United States passed a series of laws that permanently changed what money could and could not do. The Sherman Antitrust Act, 1890, monopolies, illegal. The 16th Amendment, 1913, federal income tax, created. For the first time, the government took a percentage of every dollar a wealthy man earned. The Federal Reserve Act, 1913, centralized control of the money supply. No private individual could corner the financial system again. The Clayton Antitrust Act, 1914, closed the loopholes, strengthened the government's ability to dismantle monopolies before they finished forming. The Securities Exchange Act, 1934, created the SEC. Insider trading, illegal. Markets that had been completely dark, suddenly transparent. Every single one of these laws was a direct, deliberate response to what the Gilded Age had produced. To Vanderbilt, to Rockefeller, to Carnegie, to what happened when one man could own an industry, buy a government, and fund a war, all in the same year, with no law in the country capable of stopping him
The world was rebuilt to make that impossible. And yet, the conversations happening in Washington right now are the same conversations that happened in 1890. What do we do about tech monopolies? What do we do about billionaires buying political influence? What happens when one person controls the platforms where public debate takes place? The names are different. The money is different. The questions are identical. Cornelius Vanderbilt died in 1877 as the most powerful private individual in the history of the United States. He owned more than the government. He toppled a foreign president over a contract dispute. He ran an industry with no competition and no regulation. His grandchildren died broke. The laws changed. And all that power, all that accumulated multi-generational wealth, could not survive 3 generations of people who had no idea how it had been built. That is either a cautionary tale about money or a cautionary tale about power. Probably both. If you want to understand how wealth actually works, not the version they teach in school, but the real mechanics, the hidden history, the patterns that have repeated for centuries, subscribe right now. New investigations every week. Real archives, real patterns. The things they built and the things that destroyed them. Subscribe. The next video is already waiting.